6 o'clock. Welcome to the February meeting of the Town Council of the Town of Black Mountain. Deacon LeVon Lindsay, Mills Chapel Baptist Church is going to have our invitation for us this evening. So Deacon Lindsay, if you would, just feel free to come on up, and those not present can probably hear you better if you speak into the microphone right there. That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Yes, that would be fine if you'd like to.
So good afternoon to everyone. Let us go in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to this hour asking your blessing and help us as we gather together here. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and Father, to be the best we can be. We ask this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have no announcements this evening. And citizen comments. Thank you. First, Kevin Melton. And if you would, Kevin, just give us we have your name, but address, and then you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I live at 115 Hill Street, which is above the house that's trying to be zoned commercial on number 9, first house on the left. I can't remember the exact address. Just my concerns of it being made to a business, where they could bring something in that's either loud or tear existing down and build up, which would then block my view. It's a very little parcel of land, and just a bunch of concerns on it turning into a business. And that'd be pretty much the gist of it. I'm just concerned about, it's in a bad location, bad for traffic. Traffic's horrible there, and, just really concerned of, me personally, I don't see room for parking, or it's on a septic. I'm not sure the business guidelines on a septic. You couldn't put much in there, but just, wanting to make sure nothing comes in there that impedes the value of my house or, my view or blockage or anything like that.
Right.
So that's pretty much it. So
Thank you.
is that it? So.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, and I would encourage you to feel free to reach out to the town manager with questions you have about the zoning and issues like that.
Well, we came to the first meeting that was here about a month ago, and they said we had to come back to this one. It got took to a vote, so.
That's right, but I'm just saying you're welcome to reach out to the town. Don't get information you need from the town manager as far as facts and zoning and so forth. Larry Pearlman.
I live at 203 North Park Lane. Mr. Mayor, town council members, I would like to suggest the importance to the town of Black Mountain in establishing a tree ordinance. I totally understand how important development is to the town of Black Mountain, but I think it also is important that we maintain what makes Black Mountain such a desirable area, which is our mountains and our trees. And I'm happy to report tonight that nobody is blowing up our mountains. So that's the good news. But because of a relatively small development happening right near my house, I've become painfully aware of the free hand that developers have in decimating trees, both on private and public land, with basically no need to educate themselves or consult with people who might be able to tell them a better way to do it. The city of Asheville has the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm reading from their document. They realize that trees have a profound effect on the quality of life in the community, deems it necessary and desirable in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare to enact an ordinance for the preservation, planting, replacement, and removal of trees without denying the reasonable use and enjoyment of real property. To vigorously encourage the protection of existing trees and shrubbery, to regulate the preservation, replacement, and indiscriminate removal of trees, and establishing procedures for fulfilling these purposes. Our town just above us, Montreat, has very similar wording. Hendersonville has a tree board that also has similar wording. I understand that each municipality in the state of North Carolina has to abide by North Carolina regulations as far as this matters go. But obviously it is possible to establish some procedures and policies and best practices related to conserving trees, both on private and public property. Just a couple of years ago, Van Burnett presented to this board, or not this board, but town board, that the commission had planted over 2,500 trees in Black Mountain. Since that time, that commission basically had no regulatory possibility, and it has now since been completely eliminated. I would urge the council to reinstate that commission and imbue it with some authority. And I am not anti-development. I would just simply want some appropriate balance to be struck. If you want to see what it looks like with no regulation, stop by North Park Lane and South Park Lane. You'll see an area that looks like it's been hit with a bomb that used to be just beautiful. I would just ask you, will you consider that?
Thank you, Larry.
Mayor Harris, I have one more public comment.
Okay.
That was sent in via email, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This is from Nathan West, 537 Brandon Road in Black Mountain. I have had the honor of coaching indoor and outdoor soccer in our community for 7 seasons. It has given me a unique chance to interact with our kids, both pre-pandemic and during what we are experiencing currently. Since we were allowed to start soccer again, I have observed the tremendous toll it has taken on the mental and physical health of the children in our community. I decided to research the efforts of the pandemic on our children and the results of a community that provides opportunities and invests in their children through parks and recreation programs. The data and science are irrefutable. A community that provides opportunities through parks and recreation, team sports, and healthy environments for their children win. I want to thank the Parks and Recreation Department, Josh and Colin, for their efforts during the past 2 years. They have taken every option available to provide opportunities. When soccer started in the summer of 2021, we had parents in tears watching their children unmask and seeing the joy in their child's faces as they took to the pitch. I believe moving forward as a community and through our town government, we can do more to support our Parks and Recreation Department. We must invest in the physical and mental health of our children. We must invest in and continue to maintain facilities. All this brings me to this. Currently, we have 273 kids playing indoor soccer with parents and grandparents bringing them to practice and watching games in a facility that has little to no investment in more than a decade. Our community asks you to consider investments in our Parks and Recreation Department and the Gray Eagle indoor soccer facility with our upcoming capital improvement plan budget. I know there will be a request for a new Recreation and Parks Master Plan and the urge to punt any decisions will be significant. However, I do not believe that the new master plan will recommend discontinuing any of our current facilities nor letting them fall into further disrepair. I understand that everyone has their ideas on where we should spend money, but I cannot think of a better place to put funding than in the children of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our first communication from staff council is our new police chief. Presenting to us for the first time. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening. Mayor, council, I appreciate you all giving me the next 2 hours to give my report. I'm here to give my year-end report and give you a little bit of information about where we're headed as a police department. And so a couple of things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about our crime statistics and where we are. I'm going to do that in 3-year trends because that seems to be what law enforcement does, is 3 or 5 year trends. That way you can really balance. There's always a year that might have a difference and you don't want to base it off of that. So you want to look at 3-year trends. I'm going to talk about North Carolina law enforcement accreditation, North Carolina League of Municipalities risk review. I'm going to talk about police reform and what we've done since I've been here on police reform. Training, I'm going to explain a little bit about training and what we're doing in that aspect. Community service, this is going to be the foundation of what the department is built upon. I'm I'm going to talk about our CAD and RMS, that's computer-aided dispatch and records management system, and the inoperability that we have currently. Talk about our body cameras, a little bit about issues with that. Positive news, talk about some SWAT grant equipment that we received and a recent grant that we applied for that doesn't require a match. And then some of our biggest challenges. So those are the things that I'm going to cover over the next 2 hours. First thing we'll talk about is our crime stats. So the first thing you'll see is violent crime. Violent crime consists of murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. You see that there's an increase, but I don't want you to get caught up in that increase because it's based off of the increase from, there was 3 violent crimes 3 years ago, 8 last year, and then 6. So we do the increase based off of the 3-year trend, but if you look at it, we're averaging 5.5 violent crimes per year, which we're just slightly up on that 5.5. So we're not in bad shape there, even though it's 100% from 2 years ago. 60% in property crimes. We've went from 3 years ago, 100 property crimes to 160. We've seen a huge increase in collisions, 74 to 209. Now, I will say that a lot of this stuff is being seen nationwide. So this isn't just Black Mountain issue. This is something that I think is a little bit to do with a COVID effect of some issues that we've had, and I can correlate those more as we go on throughout this presentation, explain it more to you. But so those are our crime statistics. To speak to you a little bit about North Carolina law enforcement accreditation, we have been selected as a pilot program, one of 7 agencies in North Carolina. If we pass accreditation, which my goal, we will pass, is July of 2023. So it usually takes 2 years. I'm pushing it up a little bit to try to make sure that we get it a little bit before. But here's the 7 agencies that have been selected. Black Mountain is the smallest agency, Brunswick County Sheriff's Office, Elizabeth City State University, North Carolina State, Orange County Sheriff's Office, Roxborough Police Department, and Wilmington. A lot of these are already accredited, so their work's already put in. We're kind of the pilot agency on what this is going to look like for a small agency. So what is accreditation? So accreditation is basically, we'll have up to 150 chapters and policies, anywhere from bias-based policing, how we hire, making sure that we're being diverse, what are we doing to make sure that we attract diversity. And so we have these policies, but it's not about having the policy, right? Because a policy is just a piece of paper. It's about what you do. Do you do what you say you do? So we have to supply over 1,000 proofs of that we're actually following through with our policies and procedures. And so what they do is we end up sending our policies, our procedures, our proofs to a board that will review our policies and procedures, and then they come in and do an on-site assessment and review. Are they actually doing what they say they are doing? And so basically it's a lot of pressure for me, but it's good pressure. Why is it good pressure? Because it involves risk reduction. That's why we receive an insurance reduction. It helps us get grants, so it helps the city receive funding because we're one of an agency that's trying. But number one, it's professionalism. It's the gold standard in law enforcement. You take the national policies, you mirror up national policies, and you try to follow the best practice within law enforcement. So I'm happy to take on that whole thing for the entire department, and I think it's going to be really good for the community of Black Mountain. Then talk about the law enforcement risk review. This is also something that we're looking to accomplish, but we're looking to accomplish this a little bit quicker. This is going to be done hopefully by July of this year. It also has a 14% cost reduction in our insurance year after year, so that there's some good money savings for the town. There's 39 things that they come in and check. The highest risk areas: pursuit. What do we do in pursuit? What do we do in our use of force? How do we do it? And what we have to do is, here's just an example of one thing. This is our supervisor training. So we have a policy on supervisor training. When we promote somebody, we don't just throw them into the job and say, here, you're a supervisor. It says you need to make sure that you're sending them to the best of the best, to make sure that he's gone through management courses, to make sure that he's doing or she's doing what they're supposed to do in their job. So it's sending them to the supervisor training. Then we have to send a proof of that as well. And they also do an on-site assessment. Police reform, Bill SB 300 was passed. It went into effect December 1st. I got here November 1st and moved very quickly on that. There was not any action currently on that. And so I've already started. You'll see, actually been building a platform. They said it would take 14 months. I'm hoping to have it done in 2. So what this is you see that there's a red light, a yellow light, and a green light on here. What this does is basically this tracks officer behavior. So let's say it's threshold tracking. So let's say that I set a threshold that if an officer's had 2 complaints in a year and 1 use of force, that it might yellow light that officer and alert me as a manager to what I need to do. And I can immediately look into those as individual actions and go, is there something going on here? Do I need to bring him in and counsel this man or woman that's working for me? Do I need more training? So basically what it's doing is making sure that we're upholding a professional agency and looking early on to make sure before somebody might have an incident or an altercation. Training. Want to talk a little bit about training. I'll just cover that quickly. Our training requirements have increased. They're constantly increasing. With the risk review, the accreditation, they will continue to increase. We need to always be prepared for succession planning. If somebody leaves, you don't want to have somebody who's never had training in homicide investigation or something, and then all of a sudden you're trying to send them when it's too late. Last year we had a total of 369 classes that we attended, 2,675 total hours. So if you break that into 40 hours, divide it, that's 69 weeks of total training. What does that mean? That there was an employee in training every day, or 2 employees every day last year, which causes us some staffing issues at times, and I'll get to that a little bit in a minute. Community service, this is going to be our core. What do we build upon? In May, we've gotten approval. We were working with the Ingalls. Just got approval today. We're going to do a Cops on Top. We're going to raise money for Special Olympics. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. I've done something with Special Olympics for at least 20 years. But we'll be doing that in May. There'll be more to come about that. We're starting a golf tournament. June 3rd will be our golf tournament, and I'll show you a slide on that in a second. What's that going to do? That's going to help us with our Thanksgiving fundraiser, our Christmas fundraiser. Hopefully, if the golf tournament's successful, we'll have funds to build a playground with the Rock Solid Foundation, which finds children with cancer. And hopefully, they don't have the funds for a playground. We'll build one for them, and we'll do it as a team. We're going to have National Night Out, Coffee with a Cop, and our cadet program. We've started really strengthening and moving it forward as well. Currently, I've already developed these could have been a victim card. So if our officers are out in the community, they see somebody with an open door, they have an alarm, something goes off. Sometimes they don't even know we're there. We want them to know that we care. There's a little bit of statistical information on how not to be a fraud victim on the back of the could have been a victim card. And then also, we have partnered with Kilwins, where they're providing a free ice cream. If we see somebody in the community, a child mostly, and I've partnered with the schools already, monthly I'll be going there on a program, but trying to encourage positive behavior. So if we see children that are doing something good, taking the trash out, helping with groceries, we're going to stop, say good job, and we're going to give them a free ice cream card. So that's something that we're doing as well in the community. The golf tournament built this website. It's a live website now. Haven't pushed it out too much. I like the Hacking for Heroes. That's basically because of me. Not a great golfer, but great fundraiser. I think that it's going to support some really great things that we're doing within the agency to make sure that we're having the foundation as community. Then moving on, just to let you know, we did receive an equipment grant for SWAT and $23,000 worth of equipment, which was a no-match grant, which is good. The town didn't have to spend that money, and we've went ahead and purchased the things that we need. I'm almost finishing up. I know I'm getting long-winded. Some of our biggest challenges, you'll hear me talk a lot about this, staffing crisis. It's nationwide. You can see 2 clips there that I just took from some magazines. You'll hear me talk about retention over recruitment. Recruiting a new person, basically they're 1 year no good to the community because of the training. If I can invest that $100,000 that we waste in recruiting a new person while they're sitting in training, getting new equipment and into retention efforts, you'll hear me talk about that a lot. A lot of things that we're dealing with, and this is again nationwide issues, but homelessness, the mental health crisis is through the roof. Narcotics issues are like I've never seen them before. The meth, heroin, and fentanyl are a huge issue. Our body cameras currently are no longer made, and they're not integrated with our in-car cameras. That's a big concern, a major concern of mine. If an officer is in crisis, there's a call with a crisis situation or a car chase, the last thing they're going to think about is turning on their body camera when they're jumping out of their car. If they're integrated with their in-car cameras like the newer systems are, it automatically turns on for them. If they get a certain amount outside the car, it turns on. So they're no longer making the cameras that we have, so that's an issue. CAD and RMS, I talked about that, integration with CAD and RMS. Currently, we switched over to, we're being dispatched by Buncombe County, which they're doing a great job. But one of the things is that we don't have access to their computer-aided dispatch. So that is a huge officer safety issue. It's been 25 years since I've seen that an agency doesn't have computer-aided dispatch. I'm already working with the manager, trying to work through that, trying to make sure that we have that. So we're trying to work on getting that integrated. Vehicles, I have to say, they're also a major concern. I've been talking with people about vehicles. That's a whole issue in itself, which is nationwide, but the crisis of getting cars is going to be a big concern in the future. And our fleet is very old, so I'll talk about that a little bit more in budget time. But the number one thing on staffing shortage, I wanted to show you that over the last, since the last 6 months, I want to say that we have 3 officers that patrol per shift, which always means typically that you have 2 officers. Why? Because there's always somebody sick, always somebody on vacation, or always somebody in training. Like I said, we did over 69 weeks of training So you always have somebody, and these are state mandated trainings. And then if we have officer vacancies. So over 45 times last year in 6 months, we didn't have an officer at all to cover the city, or we only had one officer. And so if we had a crisis for a domestic violence or something else, some officers didn't have backup. And so that's a severe concern. I will talk about that during budget season. I think that we definitely need to move towards 4 per shift. That's something that I'll talk about in budget. But overall, that's what I wanted to talk about through my report, and I'm open and available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Chief. Could you elaborate just a little bit more on the computer-aided dispatch, that not being available at the county, with the county dispatch? And do the other municipalities and the sheriff's department have the same problem?
They currently have computer-aided dispatch integrated, so they do not have the same problem. So what would need to happen is we would have to, you don't want to have a different records management system than your computer-aided dispatch system. So we would need to move over to the county's records management system. I've been in talk with the county. They've been very helpful. They've been working with me very well. But it's a process. It's a process, and there is some fees involved with that process. But currently, they are able to do that. Like Weaverville, Woodfin, all of them already have that integration.
But it's a matter of working with county dispatch to make that happen. You have to move toward their system, and the fee, and it costs us some.
There's
It costs us
licensing
some to do
fees,
that.
licensing, software licensing
Did we
fees.
just overlook that at the?
You know, that's something that never really did come up when we did that,
Right.
that conversation. It was not something that was
Right.
ever mentioned to me. And I will say, we are gonna, as we get into budget, we are gonna be able to save some money in places, based on that call number that was originally presented by the
Right,
county.
right.
We're substantially less than that original call number, so
Right.
that number's gonna come
And
down.
we thought that would be the case, but that sounds like something we're just gonna have to address. I don't think we have a choice.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
How long will it take to implement it? Let's say the board council is, we move through it at budget time, or maybe we need to even examine it and move faster than budget time. But how long is the implementation system? If you could go to work tomorrow morning and say, okay, we can do this. Well, so how long do you get there?
So I think with trying to make it a priority for the county, because making it our priority is not the county's priority, that they thought they could get there by July. What I've asked them is if I could have a test vehicle to make sure that we have all the equipment, we know what the cost would be, we know where we need to be. So I've asked them to work with our IT to T&E a car, to test and evaluate a car before June, so that I know where the costs are, and so that we can get everything up and running, so we can plug and play basically in July. So I'm hoping July would be a good time
So
frame.
you're really moving on it as quickly as you
We
can
are.
right now?
I'm trying.
Chief
Thank you.
has had some good conversations with the county, and I've had some conversations with the county manager
Good,
recently.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Counsel? Any questions for Chief? I'm also curious a little bit about, and this may not make any sense, but how do we compare the property crimes with your understanding of how it might be in
Other
other
municipalities?
municipalities our size, and maybe it doesn't matter? Just, is that something that's happening in pretty much every community, or what do you know?
So again, I don't want to say something and be incorrect, because I have only been here 3 months, but I think that there's a multitude of things that play into the property crime rise, which is happening nationwide. Number one, the staffing shortages. You know, if you can't be proactive, you're only reactive, that's an issue. Number two, we have seen with the drug rise that what's going to come out of that typically is property crimes, mental health crisis, property crimes. So I think that's a nationwide issue that won't particularly be solved overnight, but definitely help, if with the proper resources, we can staff it and put the people that we need where we need them, when we need them.
Thank you, Chief.
Well, I just wanted to say, it sounds like you've gotten a lot done in 3 months, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And it sounds like you're on the right track to me, especially around the diversity and so on. I really appreciated those comments.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for all your efforts so far. Do you know how we stack up compared to other municipalities around the retention of officers?
So I would say that I'm been here too little to answer that. So currently we have 2 people in field training, and we had somebody that just left for a state level job, which is understanding. That's what happens. Somebody might want to move up. So you see that 3 people in an agency this size is a big, big deal. And retention is a huge deal in law enforcement. It's a nationwide crisis. I would say that we're probably just like any other agency. I think what's important is that their leader lead by example with professionalism, and I think you make it a place that they want to be at instead of moving to another agency for extra $1,000 or $2,000. That shouldn't be important. It should be about leading with professionalism, and so that's going to take me some time. That usually takes a year or 2 to build that foundation and core.
Would you say the morale is relatively standard at the department, or?
I think that we have above board morale. To be honest, I've been very pleased walking into the agency. I think that they have a good morale.
Thank you.
Would you say our salaries are on a par of peer agencies?
I think that that's something that could be looked at. I think that a staffing study is good to look at. I think, when you're competing with cities like Asheville and Buncombe County, that's tough. That's difficult. And that's our competition. That's who we're up against. And so I think that that's something that a council and a town always has to look at. You always have to stay competitive. And again, do you want to place your $100,000 into a vacancy that you train a new officer, or do you want to put it into retention? And I think that's where council and towns really look at.
Anyone else? I do think along staffing within your department, with your officers, and with all our employees, I mean, there's a labor shortage.
Yep.
Especially trained labor.
Yes, sir.
And so I think realistically, what growth we can get, recurring growth in our budget, we're really going to need to be careful with it, because we're not going to be able to operate and have high quality police protection or high quality fire protection or high quality anything if we don't have any people. And that's just where we are now. Not that we have good morale, but it's going to cost more. It's just going to cost more, supply and demand, to keep people staffed. And so I think we all just need to take heed of that. And Chief, thank you. Anyone else, council? Thank you.
Thank
Chief.
you.
We
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate your work. The Black Mountain Library Board is on the agenda for a report, but were not able to be here this evening, and so we'll schedule that for a future month. The Wellhead Protection Plan presentation.
So we've got Miss Debbie Maynor here, and I'm going to butcher where you're from, as acronyms change so often. NCDEQ, DWR, I'm not sure which one.
No, actually.
Neither.
Neither. I do not work for a state agency. I work for a nonprofit
Okay.
organization, the North Carolina Rural Water Association is what that stands
Thank
for.
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor and Board. I was just going to say that I was going to introduce Debbie, but I'll let her do that. But I was just going to touch base, and I don't know if anybody on the board is even aware of what the Wellhead Protection Plan is. I know some of you may be, but just wanted to bring you up to speed. I know Josh had mentioned we had got an award for the town, and this is basically the project and what it was. It was created several years ago, and it's basically just what it says it is, a wellhead protection plan, which I think, correct me, Debbie, was through Raleigh, through the, you actually had it wrote down.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that if, it's through.
Water supply section.
Public water supply section.
So-
Maybe you might move that mic between you two.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually gonna give it to her in just
Okay.
a second, but basically I reached out to Debbie because she is the one that actually helped us get this back in the 90s. And so she was very aware of it, and she even showed me a newspaper
Must have
article.
been a child back in the 90s. Amazing work.
Showed me a newspaper article of where we were, actually made the front page of the news, where we were actually the model for the state of North Carolina for this. So with that being said, I will give it to Debbie and let her take over, and she can tell you the history of the wellhead protection
You
plan.
won't let me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate you being here this evening, Debbie.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time, and as Jamie said, he's invited me here to tell you a little bit about the Town of Black Mountain's Wellhead Protection Plan. Back almost a year ago, probably, I received a message through our networking that the Town of Black Mountain was was interested in updating their Wellhead Protection Plan, which was first approved in November of 1999. And the message came to me because it was well known within our organization that I had a history with Black Mountain. So I was glad to receive the message, and I called Jamie and we scheduled a time to meet. And first of all, I'd like to just go briefly tell you what a wellhead protection plan consists of, a little bit of background about it. It's 7 steps now, but when I did this back in 1999, it was 5 steps. And don't ask me, it's just a state thing, I suppose. But it's a voluntary program. It's an EPA program. So the first step is to form a planning team, a wellhead protection committee. And then we take information specific to each of the wells, such as the yield and the depth and the screened intervals. And there are several calculations that we do depending upon the local geology and topology. And we delineate a wellhead protection area. And that is an area through which contamination is reasonably likely to travel and could impact your wells. And this, it's a 10-year time of travel, and I could go into a lot more detail about that, but I won't. We delineate the wellhead protection areas, and then we do a potential contaminant source inventory of each of those areas. We look at things like underground storage tanks, animal operations, Superfund sites. The state maintains about 16 different regulatory databases, things that they regulate. So I look through those, and then I do a windshield survey and try to gather as much information about what's on the ground in those areas that might not be in some of those databases. And I just acquire as much information as I can about anything that might be out there. And then step number 4 is to develop management strategies for each of those categories of potential contamination sources. And step number 5 is to develop a contingency plan. What would you do should one of your wells become contaminated? You usually, I thought Jamie was going to stay up here and help me. You probably have an interconnection with, you got to help my memory here. You have an interconnection with Asheville.
Yes.
Okay, good. So that would be, your part of your contingency plan, and then your storage, your capacity for storage for treated water. Step number 6 is to implement and update the plan. The plans are due. There's nothing mandatory about the plan. It's all voluntary, but if you want it to remain current, it needs to be updated every 5 years. And there's some benefits to having a current wellhead protection plan and incentives from state funding and priority points on an application. And then the 7th step, that magically was created is to submit the plan to the Public Water Supply section now for its review and comment and hopefully approval eventually. And I mentioned earlier that I had a history with the town that goes way back to, it goes back to 95 actually, 1995. Black Mountain was the first community in the state to receive approval from the Public Water Supply section for developing a voluntary wellhead protection plan. In 1995, Land of Sky Regional Council in Asheville received a $10,000 EPA grant to develop a pilot plan, and the town of Black Mountain agreed to participate as that pilot plan. And I know and Land of Sky hired an intern to help with the plan, and that intern was me. And I was a senior at UNC Asheville at that time, and I know you've already mentioned I was old then. So that's how I started out with this plan. So at that time, the program was under the groundwater section. And though we tried, and Land of Sky Regional Council tried, we could not get approval for that plan at the time. But they moved the program under the Public Water Supply section where it is today. So I went on to graduate from UNC Asheville, and I went to work for the state with the UST section with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And then in 1999, I went to work with North Carolina Rural Water Association as a groundwater technicians, helping systems to develop wellhead protection plans. And so I came to Black Mountain, and we proceeded to do the work necessary to get their plan approved. And with some amendments, it was approved as the first one in the state, like we've said, in November of 1999. And since that time, the plan has been updated once in 2012 when Mark White was the Public Works Director for the water system. And then most recently, last year, Jamie and I have been working on it all year, and an updated plan was submitted to Public Water Supply section on December 20th, 2021, and we're waiting for their review and comments. And the major changes to the plan that have taken place to date have been the elimination of some of the wells. So the wellhead protection areas have changed a little bit. And the town has reviewed its wellhead protection overlay district, which was established as part of its management strategy back then, and to see if it is what they want to remain in place. I know they did back in 2012, and I think as part of this plan, the planning board has reviewed it. And it's you can be proud of that because it's one of the very few in the state that have been enacted as part of the approximately 172 plans that have been approved to date. And then we updated the inventory, and the Wellhead Protection Committee, of course, has changed. And we updated all that, contact information for emergency people, contacts and that sort of thing. And this also, as Jamie has shared with you, we've nominated the town of Black Mountain for a Source Water Collaborative Source Water Protection Award that are given out every year for people or communities who have gone above and beyond protection of their water resources. And Black Mountain will be awarded the award in March, at the end of March, at the Water Resources Research Institute Conference in Raleigh. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with, I've also submitted an article to our trade magazine, the Tar Heel Pipeline. If you get that, that'll be coming up in its next issue. So I'm really proud of all the work that's been done in Black Mountain.
We're proud of it as well, and congratulations to Jamie and your staff, and thank you, Debbie, for your support. And we'll look forward to seeing Jamie in the press when he goes down and gets here.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was proud of Chief Parker too. I've got somebody now I can compete with on report time.
All right, council, any questions?
I think part of you will probably see, some of you might see the plan when it's due to review, and so.
Yes,
but if you have any questions in the meantime and you want more information, I'll be glad to try to
Thank you.
provide it for you.
Thank you.
and I'd just like to say, we probably started on this, it was months before Christmas. So there was a lot of work went into this by a lot of people. So I just want to personally thank you from coming all the way to Raleigh several times to help me out and get this done. And it will actually go before the council to be approved. So it is not finalized yet. It is at the state now,
At the
getting
state.
pre-approved. So once it's approved, you're more than welcome to a copy of that if you want it to review. But
Do you have to give the award back if we don't approve it?
well, we may just keep it anyway. But anyway, I just want to thank Debbie personally
Yes,
for
thank both
helping
of
me
you.
out.
And Jamie's been very cooperative.
Thank you.
helping
We
me.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh, would you like to introduce our guests from our audit firm?
So we have next on the agenda is our presentation of our audit year ending June 30, 21. This is Mr. Tim Lyons with Malden Jenkins.
Welcome, Tim.
I'll try to keep this under 2 hours too. Appreciate y'all having me here tonight. Just real quick, I think I've only got like 10, 12 slides and we'll go quickly. Just kind of the highlights of the 2021 audit, a couple slides on some financial trends, comments, recommendations, and other items that came up during the audit. And certainly if y'all have any questions as I'm going through, feel free to stop me, but I've also got a place at the end in case anybody has any. So just as a reminder, as Josh said, my name is Tim Lyons. I'm the engagement partner. I've served as the partner in charge of our Columbia office and served as the head partner on the audit. Chad Jackson is a CPA and a senior associate in my office. He was the engagement in charge, and then every one of our audits goes through an independent quality control review. So when we get done, the engagement team and I finish up, we have to send everything to another partner in our governmental practice that's completely independent of the file and the job. We're fortunate to have James Bentz, who was the engagement partner on this job for a couple of years, so he knows the town, knows the operations very well, knows the financial statements, and he'll serve that role, which is nice to have the independent role, but also somebody that understands and knows the town, because they can kind of make sure that we've done everything we need to be doing from an audit standpoint. So the most important part on this, on this slide here, that second bullet point, our report on the 2021 financial statements. We will be issuing an unmodified opinion on the basic financial statements. Right now, I am working with Tammy just to wrap up some of the items that have to go in the annual comprehensive financial report for its submission to GFOA. We're working on the statistical section and the MD&A. We have to get those items finished before we can officially issue the report, but our audit procedures are finished. Our field work is done. There should be no more, adjustments or changes or anything to the financial statements. And so we'll be issuing an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. There's no higher or better opinion that you can get. It's a fancy auditor word for a clean opinion. We also have to issue a report on internal controls over financial reporting. That report includes one item as a material weakness in the town's financial internal controls or financial reporting. I'm going to talk about what that means in just a minute. Basically, the finding that will be in there has to do with the restatement of prior year balances. So, when we hear material weakness in internal controls, rightfully there's a little bit of concern there. That sounds and is important and is a weighty thing to say. However, what we're dealing with here, the standards that we have to operate under when we audit are very strict in terms of what we can and cannot do as far as reporting numbers. Whenever we have to make an adjustment, we have to evaluate those adjustments against our materiality thresholds. And if the dollar amount of the adjustment is over the threshold, it has to be reported as a finding. Our hands are kind of tied by government auditing standards there. And in this case, what we're dealing with is capital assets, which we would look at qualitatively is not that big of a deal. We're not talking about cash that's missing, or we're not talking about revenue that was unaccounted for, or something like that would have an impact on fund balance. We're talking about capital assets. So qualitatively, not very important from a financial statement user standpoint. But because the dollar amount was material, we did have to report that as a finding. So basically, in going through the fixed asset records, as Tammy and her team were getting ready for the current year audit, there were some issues that were identified in the prior year listings. And so because they were material, we couldn't run them through the current year to get those numbers corrected. So we had to adjust the beginning balances to get those items fixed. They had to do with construction in progress and some items that should have been included on the listing but were left off.
Let me ask you a question. I'll let you finish, but it's an appropriate time to ask it. We had staff turnover
Yes,
in that period.
yes.
And
I think there's,
finance director turnover, and Tammy came in. I think it's important for council to have this in mind. She came in
April.
just in the crux of closing out and so forth. So, not that, not trying to fix blame or anything, but it sort of had some exposure to something like this happening.
that's right. There were some unusual circumstances, I will say, and so hopefully, we've worked through a lot of those issues, and Tammy and I have worked on getting these items cleaned up, making sure we get them all identified in 2021 and get them fixed, and can kind of move forward from there. The next couple slides are what are called our required communications. I have to submit these to y'all in writing, which I'm doing here. I won't go through and read every single one of these, but I think that there are a couple of these are important to point out. That first bullet point, significant accounting policies, the second item underneath that. The town was required to implement a new accounting standard this year, so if you ever get the financial statements and go, compare the two year to year, you'll notice that there's a change in how the town bills and collects for the municipal sewerage district. And so there's a change in how that is being accounted for and shown in the financial statements. It's basically an additional statement that's in there this year. So, I know I could talk for hours about the technical stuff, but we'll just say that if you do notice, there is a change in how that was accounted for because of a new accounting standard that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board put out. Relationship with management, I always think this is important to point out to the board. We received full cooperation from the town's management and staff, so what does that mean? That does not mean that we impaired our independence, we were too buddy-buddy or anything like that. What we mean is that when we had requests, when we needed documentation, when we needed access to somebody, when we needed to speak to somebody, the town and management were fully cooperative. We got all the documentation we needed, we got all the records we requested, and we had access to everybody within the town that we felt like we needed to speak to during the conduct of the audit. Under the audit adjustments bullet, there were no past audit adjustments is another important item. Sometimes when we go through the audit, we identify variances that we kind of say, well, this is over our threshold where we just call it immaterial and move on. It's kind of in that gray area, but we can come to an agreement with management and say, well, this is not material, we don't need to post it. So those are called past adjustments. We need to communicate those to you in writing. We didn't have any of those this year, which is a good thing. So the numbers that you'll see reflect kind of everything. And then last but not least, that auditor independence. I always think it's important to point out that we meet all the professional standards of both our ethical standards and government auditing standards promulgated by the GAO. We have to be, or else we couldn't be able to issue a report on the financial statements. A couple of quick slides here. General fund inflows and outflows. We can see this year the blue, the revenues were significantly up. Part of that is because there was a significant inflow in the current year for new notes. So there was some significant debt activity that went on during the year. We borrowed some additional funds, and then we also used about $500,000 of funds to pay down. We refinanced that Black Mountain Avenue note payable. So that's why when you look, revenues and expenditures look like they kind of grew a lot, but it's important to note that that includes some of this debt activity for the year. So, for the most part, when we look kind of across the board, and that you see that in the fund balance as well. When you look across the board, there were a lot of forecasts from the state that 2021 being the first full fiscal year of the pandemic, we were really concerned about revenue impacts and everything else. And thankfully, none of that really came true. Sales taxes continued to go up, property valuations come up. So by and large, a positive year for the town from a financial statement performance standpoint, especially looking at the general fund. At the end of the year, the town's fund balance was about 64% of annual expenditures, 38% in unassigned. That the town's policy is to have 30% in unassigned, so we're ahead of that policy. So fund balance there. The red section is the restricted number. That's where they're restricted for state stabilization, where the state makes us go through a calculation, set aside fund balance that's not in cash or investment. So all in all, positive things when we're looking at the town's, the general fund, the main operating fund of the town.
I can never remember exactly how these things work, but did paying off the debt taking on the debt and so forth, did that impact fund balance whatsoever?
So in what the town did this year, I think the paying down of the debt probably impacted fund balance a little bit. The new debt was brought on to finance the purchase of equipment. So there'd be a no net effect there because you'd have the money coming in from a loan standpoint and then then immediately going out to purchase items. So that new borrowing would not have much of, it would gross up revenues or inflows and expenditures, but.
Paying down, which we did in this fiscal year.
Yes.
Does that impact it at all?
It does. I think, if I remember correctly, in 2020, there was a piece of property that was sold.
Right.
And there was significant proceeds from that, and that was part of what was used to pay down. So it would have been in fund balance at the beginning of the year, but then we would have.
So, but that decreased it.
It would have decreased fund balance, yes. So it would show up as an expenditure.
Right.
That's right. We also will issue what's known as our management letter that has our recommendations. The first one there about custodial credit risk, I was actually talking about this with Tammy earlier, but basically we had a CD that had grown to be just over $250,000. We know FDIC insurance is $250,000 per depositor per types of account, and we're pointing out, hey, just watch this, because if it gets to be too large, you might need to make sure you've got a collateralization agreement in place, blah, blah, blah. And talking with Tammy, we know that the town actually, when this matured, that we liquidated the CD back in the fall. So this was just something that came up during the audit, but now at this point is not really relevant because this happened, it was taken care of after year end. And this IT monitoring controls, we've been putting this in every management letter we issue for governments. Unfortunately, with the IT environment right now, it used to be that the larger governments were the ones where we'd have to be concerned for hackers, bad actors going after data systems and trying to take over things. Unfortunately, we see now that this is impacting governments of all sizes. And so as we continue to move towards an environment where there's more IT, more devices connected to our system, more software in the cloud, all those types of things, just making sure we're paying attention to vendor risk management, what we're doing to make sure that folks who are connecting to our system are doing so safely in accordance with our policies. You know, there's a lot of directions that you can take these recommendations, from a full-blown cybersecurity risk management program all the way down to just making sure we're monitoring how this stuff goes on. So don't take this as that we saw some huge issue or gap or problem with the town. We're just making sure that everybody is thinking about these things as we're moving forward, especially in this new kind of hybrid working environment where things seem to continue to move more and more towards being technology-based. A couple of slides quickly on just, some changes we'll see. The leases standard is finally here and will impact the town's financial statements for this coming fiscal year. We'll work with Tammy and her team to make sure we get this adopted and reported correctly. Some other items that the GASB is currently working on that will have an impact in the future years once we do get to a point of issuing final accounting standards. Federal actions related to the pandemic, we know that there's been a significant amount of funding that has been approved and regulations continue to come out. I was given this presentation the day back in December. I was doing a presentation to another municipality here in the state. It was the day that the Treasury issued the final rule about the CSL FRF, and so I'm like, well, the slide says it's going to be issued, but it was issued like 2 hours ago. So even just as to point out how quickly this stuff is coming out, Tammy and I were talking earlier, it feels like they were sort of building the plane as they were flying it with a lot of this stuff, but just continuing to stay on top of that. I know the LGC and the School of Government has done a pretty good job of putting a lot of training out there for folks and just monitoring how this stuff goes once we get to a point of starting to spend some of these funds. And then just as a reminder, we continue to put on our free quarterly CPE for our clients. We do it every quarter. We're doing it pretty exclusively over Zoom right now, so it's available to everybody from wherever they are. Topics range from really technical stuff from an accounting standpoint all the way down to the less technical budgeting, HR, risk management, those types of things. If anybody wants to be on the list to be getting those, feel free to get your contact information to Tammy, and I'll get it added to our mailing list. With that, happy to take any other questions that you all might have.
It's not really a question, but since we don't, the report, you're not finished. We still need to get the report.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps in one of our budget workshops, you take about 15 minutes
Sure.
to go over the actual report, and just a reminder to the public, what is the title of it?
It's
CAFR?
It's called the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report.
Yeah, comprehensive financial report. But anyway, it will be on the town website as soon as it's official.
Yep.
And then catch the council up, if you would please, on the submission of the CAFR to the state treasurer's
Sure,
office.
sure. So we will get that, as soon as we have a final document, we'll upload it through the LGC's website along with this big spreadsheet that they require you to fill out called the Data Input Workbook. We are in the process right now, so when you have an audit that's not submitted by the December 1st grace period, is what the LGC refers to it, you need to submit a contract extension with the LGC, which we have completed that, and I'll get that uploaded tomorrow. We typically don't like to send that in until we have a pretty good idea when we're going to be finished, because we don't want to tell them, hey, we're going to be done by this date, and then have it miss that date, because then they make you send in another one, and they can kind of get cranky about that.
Right.
So we'll send that in, and part of, like you touched on earlier, Mayor Harrison, I mean, part of some of the issues we had was just with some of the significant cleanup that Tammy needed to do and kind of had to work through. And so a lot of effort went into getting ready for this audit on her behalf. And so we appreciate all the work that she did. And that really, is something that we don't expect to be an issue going forward.
Well, that would happen anytime you have a transition.
That's right.
At that time of year in that position, easy for it to happen. So, and I'm not suggesting you need to be here in person at a budget workshop, but
Sure.
you or perhaps the manager on the job could
Yeah.
just call in, would be great, and walk council through the basics.
Sure.
Just the
Sure.
basics of, the balance sheet and the revenue and expenditures and so forth. And also, just in particular, to look at the water fund, just because our
Sure.
water fund shouldn't be very complicated, but our water fund changed. We brought in 400, 600? How many did we bring?
At the end of the day, it'll be 600. Right now, it's about 450.
But as of June 30, 21,
Roughly.
we were just getting ready, but we're just getting
No,
into
we
that.
probably had, in 21, we probably had close to those customers.
Did we?
Close to it.
Well, you sort of miss a year or two during the past.
2 years ago.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Tim. Council, any questions for Tim? Thank you. We appreciate you
Yeah,
being here this
absolutely.
evening.
Thank y'all.
Okay, Josh, consent agenda?
All right, your consent agenda consists of one item this evening, would be the adoption of minutes. This would be January 10th, 2022 regular session minutes, January 6th, 2022 agenda meeting minutes, January 28th, 2022 special call meeting, and December 13th, 2021 closed session minutes.
All right, council, any questions for Josh on those minutes? And if there are none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. No other questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Do we have any citizen comments on any items of new or unfinished business? And we don't have any unfinished, but we do have some new business. Any citizen comments? All right, hearing none, on to the community garden. And I believe our Mr. Josh Henderson's going to lead us in that discussion. And Diana McCall, it looks like.
All right. So in your packet, you should have a copy of the 2019 master plan, which was designed by Asheville Design Center for Veterans Park South, which at the time was integrating a new child care center in with some community garden upgrades. So just to give you a little bit of background, what this is concerning is the barn that we have down there. And the current barn that is down there was there when we took on that property. And I believe the community garden moved there in 2004. So it's pretty dated, it's pretty old. We have had to replace the roof in 2008 and 2011, or 2021. That was done by some independent contractors, and then we also had to replace the floor partially in 2021 because of the roof being damaged and leaking and water and that sort of thing. So we've been kind of patching it together over the years, letting it serve the purpose that it has. And so Diana and I got together looking at this master plan in 2020, and we started looking at how can we fulfill this plan that's been in place. So by doing that, we applied for a USDA grant in 2020 and in 2021 to seek funding to replace the barn that's down there. That grant was for $300,000, and we were not awarded either year. I think I had submitted would be on the screen. We had put together, as part of the grant proposal, we had to include, a conceptual design, something that we would like to see down there in the application. And so I don't know if it's
working for some reason.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's fine. I can send it out in the morning. But essentially, the ADC plan that you have in your packet consisted of a event space pavilion and a barn upgrade. And the design that we submitted for USDA kind of combined those two things into one building, because one of the concerns with following through with the ADC plan was that if we put two separate structures, we would be removing about 50 species of trees and shrubs and things. And so we're trying to essentially eliminate that from the plan. So after the failed attempts at the grant, a lot of the community gardeners and volunteers kind of got together. They formed an advisory board under the Parks and Greenways to try to help assist us in finding ways to fulfill this master plan. And that's where we're at now, is trying to figure out what can we do moving forward to get a new space down there. Some of the needs are, it would improve our operations. We don't have, Diana, who's the community garden manager, doesn't have an office space or anywhere to work. She works out of her house. There are several groups that come from schools, colleges, and things and do tours, learn about the community garden, and are educated. There's no space for them to meet when they're down there. They're just kind of in the garden. It would also provide us, one of the things we're looking at is putting a greenhouse with this new barn that would give us the opportunity to grow our own things rather than purchase them from other organizations in the community. And it would align with the comp plan that was done for the town, along with the Blue Ridge Road area small plan and the new interchanges coming in to the Veterans Park area. But yeah, that's kind of an update. If you guys have any questions or.
Well, perhaps get with Josh, the town manager, Josh, and we're going to have a workshop on the 3rd and the 5th.
I think, yes.
First Saturday.
Mhm.
And the point is that we will be, Josh's objective is to list out really things that are in our plan.
Right.
That council needs to consider for capital budgeting.
Right.
And so a little more detail perhaps, and a little more idea of cost, and we can look at it too. For that meeting, and it's a workshop, so we're not, there's not going to be public comment or anything. It's a workshop, but it'll be, I would think that's a good place to start.
That'd be fine.
To let the rubber hit the road with it a little bit.
Sounds good.
See how it kind of plugs in. Sound good? Any council? Thank you.
I
Thank you both.
appreciate you bringing it to us now so we can have it on the table when we're at the meeting on the 5th. And it's a real important project, and I'm excited to look at your plans.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Short-term rental discussion, Josh.
All right, it's not gonna work, is it? We're having technical difficulties, not really sure why.
We were really going to cover a pretty basic,
Very basic, about 10 slides, and if I have to, I'll just read. And
I think that'd be the way to proceed, and if it happens, it happens.
Just go with that, just scroll through. So, what I want to do here in the next few minutes is just talk very briefly about short-term rentals, very briefly, very high level. This is something that is going to be discussed at length in our new UDO, which is our Unified Development Ordinance that we've paid for partially in this year's budget, and then the other half will be in next year's budget. But let me just jump in. So there's been some relatively recent legislation, court case, you can go back, for the Court of Appeals, and they've determined that short-term rentals are going to be viewed as a residential use, not a business use. And that's how the Court of Appeals is viewing that currently. Next. When we look at the zip code here in Black Mountain, 28711, we find about 500 active listings for short-term rentals. Now, it doesn't, obviously it's going to include areas outside of town, but in the zip code 28711, we have about 512 active listings. 94% of those are entire homes or studios, and 6% are individual rooms. These can be found, of course, on your typical websites, Airbnb, VRBO, that sort of thing. Next. In Buncombe County as a whole, this graph would be good for you to see, but hotels and motels make up about 70% of the sales in the county as far as those types of rooms. Short-term rentals make up about, I would say, 25% roughly of that currently, and then the other 5% would be bed and breakfast. We have done a little bit of homework on other municipalities and cities in the region that do regulate short-term rentals. Those being, of course, Asheville, Brevard regulates short-term rentals, Woodfin also does, and Burnsville. We did look at Waynesville and Weaverville. Neither one of those regulate short-term rentals at this time. As far as Brevard goes, their regulations really are zoning heavy. So they don't require a permit for people to give you. They don't require anybody to register it. They do limit it to certain number of people per bedroom. And of course, if they're renting the house, it can't look like they're renting the house from outside. There can't be any signs for rent, that sort of thing. As far as parking goes, the way they regulate it is whatever the type of dwelling unit is, that's how they regulate the parking. So if it's 2 cars allowed per dwelling unit, that's how they regulate that. Woodfin, similar. They also regulate by zoning. They do require registration with the town with their short-term rentals. They also do something if there's complaints. If there are properties that receive 3 complaints, then they revoke the permit for 1 year. So there's, as you can see, it's kind of similar, but they do things a little bit differently. And Asheville, of course, is just different. They do homestays. They really don't do short-term rentals, but they have, it's very complex in Asheville. Burnsville, they are regulating it. They similar to the other 2. They say all short-term rentals, which are residential, must adhere to the same restrictions as single-family dwellings do. The property owner must also designate a local contact in case there are issues that arise who can be contacted. Next. 2 obvious no's that we know of just by looking at statutes and looking at some recent case law. We cannot enact moratoriums on any residential uses. Cannot do that. And in no event may local government do any of the following. That would be adopt or enforce any ordinance that would require any owner or manager for rental property to obtain any permit or permission under Article 12 and Article 11 of this chapter from local government lease or rent residential property or to register rental property than local government. So what that really is saying is we aren't allowed to have folks sign on to a rental registry. That's not something that is permitted in the state. Zoning, to date, there's no legislation that prohibits municipalities from defining or regulating these land uses. We do have them defined now in our land use code, we just don't regulate them. School of government continues to believe that we can use zoning to regulate. And they say that you can define the use, determine which districts it's allowed in, and where the use may be allowed by right, or where you require additional conditions.
Hey, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Could you go back and repeat what you said about you can't do a registry?
So, I think in the past, over the years, there may have been an option at some point, Ron, you can help me if I misspeak, where there were rental registries, but that is not something that is allowed now. So we can't go around and say, all the rental houses, we have to register you and come in and do inspections because you're a rental house. That's not something that's permitted.
Right, that's
But you
right.
can require a permit?
You can require a permit,
So wouldn't that be a registry of sorts?
just depending on how you look at it.
Okay.
But you can't do inspections.
You wouldn't do inspections
That's,
like that.
Okay.
that's probably what it's more addressed toward, I bet. But so you can do a permit, so you can keep track. But, you can know where they are, you can know where they are.
Sure. Yeah.
Sort of like our discussion with the food truck.
That's right.
It's just like, let's just know, at least know what we got going on.
That's right.
So we know how many.
You're into that fuzzy area, just because some of these towns are getting away with it, doesn't necessarily say if those towns were challenged, those permit situations would survive.
There, thanks, that's kind of what I was.
There's currently a case being litigated in Wilmington, and specific issues that the courts have seen with Wilmington's regulations
Jessica, do you
are
wanna-
separation between short-term rentals, caps on short-term rentals, lotteries to obtain a permit, and amortization for any previously unpermitted short-term rentals.
You want to add something?
I just had one tiny little thing, and that is you can't make a registration, like a straight, like I have a list of these things, but you can't have a zoning permit. That being, and which is a little bit of splitting hairs, but that's the legal way around it. So you, in essence, still do generate a list, it's just not a registry.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, explain the difference between a zoning permit and a,
So a registry is just saying, all these things have to be written down on a list that's based on the fact that it is a thing. A zoning permit is not calling out that use in a specific way. Everything has to be vetted for zoning compliance, and so when you define a use, you get a zoning permit that says, you may do this thing at this location because it is used by right or meets these conditions. That's the difference. Does that make sense?
Often referred to in some of our discussions as a certificate of zoning compliance.
That's right.
okay. So when we're talking about Burnsville and Brevard, I believe,
They're doing zoning compliance.
okay.
Great. Do you have anything else, Josh? I'm sorry.
That's it. I wanted to finish with that litigation one, and just for council to know that this is going to be vetted in depth, because we're going to go through this with our UDO, which will involve planning board, citizens, and of course, council and mayor.
Right.
Just kind of wanted to give you a high level, kind of where we stand now, what options may be available to us.
Well, it's something that we needed to pay attention to at some point in time. You just have to address it one way or the other, so it'll be
Josh,
good.
at the very beginning, you said the General Assembly had switched from, we couldn't call it business, now it's
No,
residential.
that was the court, that was a
Oh,
court
the
appeals
court,
decision.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you just say that part again?
So the courts are viewing that now, short-term rentals, as a residential use, not a business use, not like a hotel.
So what's the impact of that? What,
The impact is the zoning districts it can occur in. We had several years ago, actually, we weren't the case, but there was a situation in Black Mountain where this people owned three houses, and they were renting two of them for short-term rental. And the people were saying, that's a business operating in our neighborhood. And that was just about concurrent with the time the Court of Appeals in some other city, it was challenged as a business, said, no, that's a residential use, that's not a commercial use. So your zoning, you have a district that's zoned for residential use, that by itself doesn't limit short-term rentals. You'll have to address those particularly. Asheville does that by allowing short-term residential use in certain areas, not in others. They didn't completely outlaw short-term rentals, but they really confined it by limited to certain zoning districts. But it is a residential use, not a commercial use. That means we can't stop them in your neighborhoods as a business. It's a residential use. Court of Appeals has spoken.
As a residential use, is there any situation or any jurisdiction that is charging an occupancy tax? Similar to a hotel or B&B?
I don't have that information. We can sure look into that, but I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm sorry, what's your question?
Like an occupancy tax for, like a hotel would, charge by guest,
Well, right now, the occupancy tax is at the county level.
Right.
And so if you are operating an Airbnb in Black Mountain, you have to pay.
I think you pay that to the county
pay
Do you
now,
pay that?
pay
Do you pay
that,
that? Okay.
Yeah.
but we don't get any of that.
Sure. Well, we.
County
yeah,
get. Well, I guess in some form or fashion, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Boone's doing a lot, it might be worth looking into Boone's guidelines too.
Anything else, council? This will be picked up again sometime soon, so. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Jacobs Cottages water line acceptance. Josh?
So this was in your packet. This is a development over off of Jane Jacobs that's been ongoing for a number of years. They are at the point now where they would like for us to take over their water lines. This is standard fare. This is what we typically do. So they put the water lines in the ground. We get as-built. The engineer certifies them, and of course it goes to the state for permitting. So at this point, all we really need to do is just accept the water lines, and then when something breaks, it'll be our responsibility in there, and not the developers.
All right, and so we would then, any questions for Josh? Hearing none then, I would entertain a motion to accept the water lines in Jacobs Cottages into the town water system.
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Summer camp fee schedule.
Go on up.
So the current fee schedule, I believe or the current fees for summer camp, I believe is $108 a week. Is that what?
Sounds right.
We haven't raised fees since 2015 on summer camp at all. If you know anything about this area, this is a conference and camp center happy place. We are one of the absolute cheapest day camps around and have a very consistent waiting list. So we're looking to raise the fees $10 this year. Blame it on what you want, inflation, whatever. It allows us to continue to go on trips and do things and kind of keep up with that cost. So.
Is that increase sufficient to do that? It sounds like it, but.
Well, I think the biggest thing was in this community is remaining affordable for people that are in the community to continue to take advantage of summer camp. So we wanted to increase it slightly enough to cover what we can, but also keep it affordable. So.
Realizing that the town is, it's just part of the service we're providing is the subsidy.
Right.
So, all right, I would entertain a motion to approve the summer camp fee schedule as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Archie. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Text amendment, phase 2, post-construction stormwater ordinance.
Jessica, come up and lead us through that one.
I promise this will be the least painful stormwater agenda item you've ever had. Currently, our post-construction ordinance is based on a model ordinance, and it's clunky and hard to read, and has created some confusion and permitting headaches. So to clarify, we want to remove the word impervious area so that the post-construction ordinance is tied solely to the creation of impervious surface area, which makes sense because post-construction offsets and mitigates impervious area, not disturbance. And you will have some other ordinances coming to you in the next couple of months related specifically to sedimentation, which is what disturbance is related to. And then there's some clarifying language about plans, planned and common projects, which is already in there, but not very clearly worded, and we wanted just to clarify that. So for example, if you had 3 parcels in a row and you were putting one house on each one, and cumulatively they crossed the 5,000 square feet, they would collectively have a post-construction stormwater permit, which is already the rule, but not that clearly stated. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Questions for Jessica? Could you explain an example of the first change with the impervious? I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So say you are building a house and you are clearing an area that is 5,001 square feet. But the amount of impervious surface you're creating is less than that. Well, the way it's written now, you would have to create a post-construction stormwater permit. And it would have been triggered by moving dirt, which that's really something we're concerned about with sedimentation and erosion control, not post-construction. Post-construction is really dealing with infiltration rates post-construction to pre-construction. So in that situation, we would not want to see a post-construction stormwater ordinance. We would want to see erosion control measures during the actual construction. Does that kind of separate them out a little bit?
Which I think is what you're going to see, as she alluded to. You're going to see some more language coming before you in the next few months about specifically sedimentation, erosion control. Currently, the county does that for us, but it's only on things over an acre. So there's really not a mechanism, so to speak, where we have the ability to deal with that. So that's what this new language will be.
So we really have to tie both of these things together.
So you would really just be permitting very specific phases of construction and not putting permits onto aspects of construction that don't really make sense. So if you had a grading permit and you don't want a grading permit that results in a post-construction, you want a grading permit that has sedimentation and erosion control. So this is going to allow us to tease those out a little bit and put control specifically to each piece and stack them as needed. In some cases, you won't need all three. Maybe you'll need one or two.
Questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ryan. Questions? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. All right. We have a public hearing, and just so the public knows, we're going to start the public hearing, and then we're going to table it until the next meeting because all the parties could not be here this evening. And so that's how that will proceed. And so that being the case, I would entertain a motion that we open the public hearing.
So moved.
Discussion, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And Ron or Josh, would we like to table at this point and then start with citizen, with Jessica's staff presentation and then citizen comments next month? Can we do that?
You can do that.
Okay, well, that seems to make more sense because we'll have a more complete hearing next month. I mean, to hear, if council thinks that they'd like to hear public comment, or is there public comment tonight on this, then we can hear it. It's fine.
If there are people here who would like to comment, I think we should.
I think
give them
that's,
the opportunity.
I would agree. So, Jessica, you go ahead and give the staff report, and we'll have public comments, and at that time, we will likely table until March, but we'll proceed with that.
Okay. Steve Holland purchased the property at 713 on Highway 9. This looks like a single-family house sort of across from Ingalls. It is currently zoned TR4, and they are requesting a designation of HB8 to allow for commercial use. The planning board had heard this request at the regular meeting in December and voted 6-1 to not recommend the application. Largely, there were concerns about impacts to traffic and potential unknowns because it is a conventional request, and so they have to allow and entertain all possibilities of the HB8 district. But they also acknowledge that this is the type of development we will see in the area. We will see more commercial development through the corridor. And their general thought is maybe that they would prefer to see this happen when the roundabout is completed and some of the traffic in the area is maybe improved.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public who'd like to speak?
Okay, Kevin, you tell them all you again.
Well, as I said earlier,
If you could name and address.
Kevin Melton, 115 Hill Street. As I said earlier, I live above that piece of property and just have concerns, about the traffic, noise, what's going to go in there. They tear it down and build something up, block my view. And then, raise the taxes, but also one of the main points that I tried to get a point the last time, and I got at the last meeting, and I got interrupted abruptly, was I brought up an instance of down near my mom's house, the Bush restaurant. They allowed a business to go in there, and now they're going to try to fix the parking because the parking's awful. It's very dangerous. People out in the road, you go to dodge it. They've got big containers up. You can't see around them. Then they're getting ready to hit a car head on because you can't see them. So a lot of my concerns while I was trying to get a point and I got cut off was because they're working on that, but you let the business come in and then now you're going to fix the parking. Well, where that's at, I was worried about the same thing happening. You allow businesses to go in and then they're parked all the way out into number 9 because there's hardly anywhere for them to park. How long is that going to, that's very dangerous there. It's a very dangerous place to go in and out of there. Because I've lived there almost 20 years now, and it's not a good area to add any traffic to. And that was my concern when I brought that up about the Bush, thing. If you want to go back and listen to the, recording or whatever, but that's a lot of my concerns is the traffic. We don't know what's going to go on with the roundabout. We discussed that the last time, and just really concerned about a business going in there. It's a little small piece of property, 0.36 acres, I think it is, or of an acre, and, you know, it's an old house. A little concerned about what would go in there. You know, like I said, I'm right there at it. And then also, like I said, raising the taxes, cause I know commercials moving and going out and everything, but like what I mentioned in that last meeting was, you know, I was born and raised here. You know, it took me a long time to find my dream property, or what I want to call it. And, you know, it's not that important to me to, you know, make money off my property or anything, or to get more value by making it commercial or anything. And, you know, I just want to try to do my part to make sure that, you know, things don't come in and, you know, hurt my value of my property, even though I have no interest to sell it, but I also don't want it to be, you know, like I said, block my view. If something come in, they tore this down and built something up, you know, it would block my view. And, you know, that was one of the reasons I chose that piece of property.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Joe Tyson, 309 North Doherty Street, Black Mountain. I received notice because I'm a property owner within the notice area, and my property is commercial. But I'm here really to speak on behalf of Kevin and Sonia Milton and the neighbors who live there in that neighborhood. It's traditionally a residential neighborhood off Hill Street. Hill Street is already challenged because it's not a city street and it's a privately operated street, which all these residences operate off of. If you ever go up Hill Street, you'll find out it's one of the most dangerous places in town. The hope is that when DOT puts in the roundabout and re-engineers that road, that they can improve that access. But now would not be a good time to add more traffic from a commercial location. It would just exacerbate a very bad and dangerous traffic situation. This is a situation where I have sympathy for both parties. The people who bought the building, they're out-of-town real estate developers, and they saw an opportunity to come in and buy a residential piece, a small residential piece that abuts commercial. So they're trying to maximize their return on the property, and they thought that if they could get it rezoned as commercial, they could put in a building that would draw more revenue, or they could sell for a higher price. If I were a real estate developer coming into Black Mountain, I'd do exactly the same thing. I would come to the town and I'd ask to give me permission to make this commercial so I can make more money off of it. I understand that. I like to operate that way myself sometimes, but I think in this case, the board's primary responsibility is to the residents of the residential neighborhood, who, I think if you polled them, they would all be against it. Most of them don't want to come and speak in public. They don't want to stir it up. Kevin is right behind this property, and it would impact him more than anyone else. I think one of these days that everyone there might decide that the best thing is to make that a commercial zone through there. But I really think that the residents who are there probably should be the ones to make that request and to reap the benefits from it at some point when they decide they don't want to live there because there's too much traffic. But right now it is a residential district, and I think that the planning board was quite intentional in deciding on the side of the people who already live there, not the people who are coming in to make some money. These are good people who are coming in to make some money, but they don't have any stake in the residential area. So this is a case where the residents there are asking the town board and the planning board to protect their interest, because their interest is to live there in peace and quiet in a residential neighborhood where they don't make the traffic any worse than it already is, or any more dangerous than it is. Plus, if the rules are relaxed for commercial, they're not sure what's going to be built there, and it's a very little small piece of property in the middle of their residential neighborhood. So I would argue with Kevin and Sonia and the other neighbors that it's best to leave this alone until the neighborhood itself decides that it's time to change that zoning, and not let somebody from out of town come in and request that zoning. I mean, at some point you got to protect your residents.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the public who wishes to speak? Thank you. So It would be, if no other member of the public wants to speak, I would entertain a motion that we continue this public hearing
To the next, and state the next regular
to the
meeting.
next stated meeting, which would be our March meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
The 14th
Questions?
of March also.
Or comments? Beg your pardon?
14th of March also.
How about that? No other questions? A motion to table until the next meeting?
Continue.
Continue till the next meeting has been made. And all those in favor, aye? And opposed, no. And I believe, if I can find my agenda, I believe that concludes our business this evening. Mr. Sneed, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just, as the board knows, over the last term of the legislature, I tried to keep up with what legislation was out there that would affect the town. And a whole lot of it carried over, and we may see it again this coming term. But a couple things touching on that came up tonight, one of those being short-term rentals. There was legislation out there, there's a bill written that would limit our ability to control short-term rentals. That's still in committee. The second was a proposal that we have some sort of ordinances to control how trees are dealt with, and maintained. And as the board knows, there were two opposing bills, one that would keep us from having any ability to do that without Raleigh approving, and another one giving us a free hand. Both of those are stuck in committee. We may hear about both of those this coming session.
Thank you, Ron. Josh?
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor.
Council?
I'd just say I'm real impressed there's so many people here on Valentine's Day.
Really?
And we hope your sweethearts are not upset with you for being down here. But good for you.
Anyone else? I would remind the public that the Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast will be virtual. And I think this was in the paper, but it'll actually occur virtually in March. It's going to be recorded this weekend.
Yes, that's correct.
But it's a March date that I just don't have off the top of my head, but just a reminder that, and this was true last year as well, but it's a community event that because of COVID, we unfortunately haven't been able to gather, but it happened last year and it will happen again this year. And there was an article in Sunday's paper, I believe, about the speaker. And I don't have anything else. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening, and meeting adjourned.